So I am going to go ahead and get us started on time as people flow into the virtual space. Just to go over some housekeeping and to welcome everyone to the second in the series of webinars focused on the transformation of casino advertising. As I said last week, I think we can all agree, last week, 2 weeks ago, I think we can all agree that the fracturing of media channels has made reaching our ideal target way more efficient, but way more confusing at the same time. And I don't know about you, but it seems like every week I'm reading an article about some new option and some change and some new word that I haven't heard. So this webinar series is helping me as much as it's helping you, or so I hope. With all of our casino marketing bootcamp programs, our goal is always to give you the tools and insights to make all of us better marketers. Last week, we covered some foundational work, a bit of 101. And today we're going to kind of get further into the world of solutions and opportunities and how they can best serve our needs. You see Drew and Adele on the screen. But before I turn this over to Drew, I wanted to remind you that this session, and just like the rest of them, are going to be available via recording, and you'll receive a link in a couple of days or so. I also want to do a little self-promotion. In about a month, we're going to be hitting the road with a series of regional boot camps. And while our signature event in New Orleans continues to approach a 360-degree view of casino marketing, the regionals are designed a little bit more for the market and the topics that affect them currently and in the near future. So we're going to be at IP in Biloxi on May 1st and 2nd. And then we're going to Rolling Hills in Corning, California for the 15th and 17th. So the Biloxi event is designed for marketers just like our normal boot camps. But the one in California that we're doing is a brand new one, and we're doing it for general managers. So if your GM is trying to get a better handle on marketing, or if you'd like them to, just send them our way. We will champion your causes and educate them and make them better partners for you. This summer, we're also going to be heading up to Mystic Lake for a boot camp that's going to walk you through building a marketing plan. And then we'll end our US tour. Maybe I'll get t-shirts made. US tour in the Pacific Northwest with our second regional boot camp there. Nice little surprise, and something we're able to do is that for anybody who registers for a boot camp for this year, we are actually doing a bonus webinar for boot camp registrants about G4, Google Analytics 4, and we're going to walk through Looker Studio and help you set up dashboards that will help you, because if you've looked in the Google Analytics 4, you've probably tossed your hand, thrown your hands up in the air and said, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. Again, something that helps me as much as it helps you. The chat, for some reason, Zoom disables the chat during these webinars, but you can send any thing through the Q&A. I'll see that. I'm going to keep it up on the screen. And so is Adele. If we see a question that maybe is on topic with what Drew is talking about, then and there, we will probably rudely interrupt him and give him the question so he can address it. If not, then we'll wait till the end. And next, in 2 more weeks, we're going to be going through data, which is a really great part of these new marketing channels. And so what we're going to do this week is I'm going to take everybody that's in the room that has registered, that has registered for the webinar, and Drew has nicely and generously offered to give one lucky property a free, correct me if I'm wrong, a data analysis package. Is that what you're calling it, Drew?
Sure. We call it pre-campaign research, but basically it's going to be a pretty much like a profile of visitation to your individual property, and it'll show where people are traveling from, the route they're taking to get there. It'll have some details around like demographics and a couple of other neat things that we can pull with our platform. But it's usually where we start all of our campaigns, so I figured it'd be really neat to highlight and offer to somebody.
So I think we're going to give that away. I figured out how to do a random draw when I just download the list of attendees into an Excel sheet. So we'll pull a random name, so to speak, and you will, Drew will get in touch with you, and you'll get your analysis of that information, and hopefully you'll allow us to use it in the next webinar. If not, then we'll have to use some anonymized data, but it'll still be just as valuable. So let's get started. I think most of you met Drew last week, but for those of you who are joining us new, I think there are a couple of names that I didn't see last week. Quickly, Drew has worked in digital media since like 2014, but he's been in media way longer than that. He's worked with both traditional and digital. So he brings a really vast experience in running multi-platform campaigns that focus on all aspects of the marketing funnel. Right now, he's the regional vice president of sales at Q1 Media, where he oversees pretty much the entire country, but specifically Northwest, Southwest, and Southeast. Who does the Northeast regions? While also continuing his work on his core clients, consisting both of agency, he works both agency and direct, and he works with a variety of verticals, but his strongest experience is with travel and tourism. Drew is a native New Orleanian like me, but he spends time with family and travel, and he says he plays as much golf as he can. I think it's because the swing helps him get ready for Mardi Gras beads. I'm gonna turn this over to you now, Drew.
Sounds about right. Let's let me get my screen shared here correctly, and we will be off and running. Okay, very good. We went through a lot of the introductions last week, so we won't spend as much time doing that. Or sorry, 2 weeks ago, so we won't spend as much time doing that. 2 weeks ago was really meant to be a very kind of 50,000 foot view of the digital ecosphere in general. I know that it was kind of rushed. A lot of these things that we talked about, like privacy and cookies, are probably topics that won't really ever have to be discussed on an individual level from yourself. But I do think it's important to understand because it does speak to how some of this data is aggregated. Like Julia said, the next webinar a couple of weeks from now, we're going to start to talk more about weaving data in to make sure that we're hitting the right targets and helping run good ROI on our campaigns. But today, what we're really going to do is we're going to review all of the different, or I should say, we're going to review the common digital solutions that are out there today. So before we get into each individual solution, we're going to look at that marketing funnel as a whole. Typically, when I'm looking at building a campaign or strategizing on a campaign or planning for it, budget, of course, always comes into play, but you really want to try to be hitting as many parts of the marketing funnel as possible. With this expansion of the digital world and all of the offshoots and everything that's always coming to us, I'm pretty sure most of you all are getting pitched pretty consistently on the latest and greatest. Buy CTV from me, or buy audio from Pandora, or go place these TikTok ads here and there. And it's all well and good, but we do want to make sure that everything wraps into a well-planned media campaign, and that includes making sure that we're hitting the different parts of the marketing funnel. So to review a little bit about each of the solutions that we'll be reviewing today, this is just kind of a quick update of some of the stuff that we reviewed last week. So in some way, shape, or form, we'll touch on all of these a bit today, and we'll talk a little bit more about what each one of them does, where it fits in the funnel, what type of benchmarks you should be looking for from a metrics perspective. Are there any other ways to optimize and or measure from each one of those particular solutions? But we'll get into each one of them. But as we're doing that, this is, I guess, my version of what I call the marketing funnel out there, and I think everybody at the end of the day understands that we've got to spend money to create a brand awareness, for our individual properties or our individual brand. Lots of times when I'm talking with marketers, we understand that we need to do that, but then of course we also want something out of that. Where's my cost per visit? Where's my ROI? How do I compute this and that? So to me, it's really important to understand where all of the solutions that you might be getting pitched or might be hearing from vendors on, where that kind of fits into play. And that includes on the traditional side. Obviously, I'm a digital strategist these days, and we execute digital campaigns. I have sold for print before, and I understand what TV and radio do. So I do think it's important to understand where all of these pieces fit in the funnel. So obviously, you'll get copies of this afterwards, so we're not going to spend time breaking down each one of these, but I'll kind of quickly highlight a lot of the ones that we'll talk a little bit about today. So up at that top part of the branding funnel, you've got your TV and your broadcast that pop up there. You've got your print publications, and you've got your radio stuff. Typically, there's not as much targeting that you can add on to those particular, traditional sides of things. You can align with different parts of the paper, or you can align with like an audience that typically watches certain shows and ask for your commercials to be lined up with that. But it's not the same on the digital side where you can layer in third-party data or first-party data to get a little bit lower in the funnel to target your particular users that you want to be in front of. But that being said, those are typically where the traditional pieces are going to play. The other things that you're going to get in there from the digital side, you'll get your connected TV when you're in that streaming space. That's an upper funnel awareness tactic. Your audio, which you'll talk about, that's an upper funnel awareness tactic. Digital out of home, some of the ads that you see on like the gas station screens and when you're walking through the mall. These are all upper funnel tactics because they're really just meant to place like a brand impression. Most of them are unclickable, so you're not going to be able to get that secondary engagement directly from that ad. So you're counting on strong ad recall to be able to have them work down your funnel from there. As you start to get down more to the middle part of that funnel, you start to get people who are interested in your product and or doing their research, and then kind of working them into the consideration stage there as well. So this is where you see some different other solutions start to pop in, like maybe some targeted email if you're buying the right type of list. This is where retargeting comes into play. You've served somebody an ad, they've clicked on it. We want to retarget them to continue to establish our brand presence with them and also encourage them to come back and engage with us further. We'll spend some time kind of breaking down the mobile device ID space today. This is actually a space that we play a lot in based on the fact that we can create super custom audiences. I've done this for most of my casino clients in the past, and we'll explain it and talk about it a lot more when we get into 2 weeks from now session, but that's where that will play. And then of course, as you get even lower to the bottom portion of that funnel, you get consumers who are, very interested in an intent-based engagement with you all and or all the way down to that conversion. And that's when you start to bring in things like targeting people based on their IPs. Maybe you're doing custom CRM matching. You're bringing in, search engine marketing or pay-per-click advertising. So we'll kind of break down each one of these. But to me, when I look at planning or strategizing a campaign based on budget, I want to hit as many pieces of this funnel as we possibly can. As you are coming and getting pitched on the latest and greatest CTV, I think it's important to kind of look at, how many upper funnel awareness tactics you already have in there. What does your TV spend look like when looking at how to try to weave all of that stuff into play? Okay. So quick kind of, review of the marketing funnel, and then we can kind of talk about each one of the solutions and where each one of them fits in. So talked briefly last week about CTV and OTT. Really important to understand kind of the differences. So I found this definition that I think is pretty easy, and it's that first bullet point there. Really just says that connected TV refers to internet connected TVs. So 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say that's the TV that's hanging on your wall. That's either got smart TV capabilities or obviously is connected to the internet. And then OTT is a little bit more of a bucket term that basically outlines video content that is streamed on the internet, but it's accessed not the traditional way via cable or satellite. So this could be, pre-roll videos that are popping up on your computer. This could be, watching Hulu from your mobile device, different things like that. So it's streamed via the internet and not being accessed via traditional cable or satellite TV. So connected TV has grown leaps and bounds over the last handful of years. The pandemic really started to exacerbate this and push more people away. If you think back to 2020 and 2021, a lot of live type of events that we would usually watch on cable or that would require a subscription were gone. So a lot of people started cutting that cord. They switched over more to the streaming. Now, granted, that process was already really starting, but the pandemic really kind of pushed more people there. People were at home a lot more. We were social distancing from each other. I've forgotten the term for a second, and so we were at home really driving all of this different type of content, trying to stream because we wanted that entertainment when we needed it and we wanted it available to us. So what that does for you when you use that as an advertising platform, and if you think about even your own habits, in my opinion, you get a very engaged consumer. You know, when I compare this to traditional broadcast, you might wake up in the morning, or maybe your parents woke up in the morning and they turned on the morning news, and while they're cooking breakfast for their kids and they're reading their morning paper and drinking their coffee, the news is playing in the background. Versus somebody who's sitting down, at their set-top TV box, clicking on a piece of content that they want to watch and engage with. To me, you get a much more engaged consumer. You've got somebody who sat down, they're the ones that are driving the actual content. And so to me, ad recall and actually consumption of that ad is going to be a lot stronger. So it's a really good way to kind of look at the connected TV space as you get an extremely engaged consumer. Now, I'd say the one potential downfall of it being a digital solution that we can't really take advantage of is because it's, running in that connected TV space, it's going to be very infrequent that we're driving clicks from that particular solution. So it's important to understand what we're using that for. If you need to get hundreds of people to your website in a short amount of time, CTV is not going to be the solution for you, just because it's not really set up to drive clicks like that. Some of the typical benchmarks that we get to measure from are what's called the video completion rate. Keep in mind, this is going to be one of your more cost prohibitive type of solutions. It's going to cost more than probably the majority of the other digital solutions out there. So we're going to want to make sure that the majority of the people are seeing this ad all the way through. So
Hey,
industry standard, oh, please.
Drew, because you say that that's the more costly of them, like, is there any way that you can compare like a click to completion? Like, is it $2 for every one? Is it?
No, so like I said, the clicks should be extremely rare in the pure CTV environment. Sometimes in the OTT environment, they're a bit more prevalent because you might be watching on like a laptop where you can click
Mhm.
and engage. But typically from your set-top box, if you're watching,
Right.
some type of CTV provider, it's not going to be a clickable ad. It's going to run. Our hope is that somebody doesn't try to X out of it, which is why they come with such high video completion rates.
Okay.
Um, Typically, I would say, I'm putting an average of 90 to 95% video completion. We're usually seeing more like 97, 98. A lot of these players do make those things unskippable, which then kind of goes back to that purely engaged consumer that we're trying to show
Mhm.
that ad to. So to me, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You are going to pay a little bit more on a CPM basis to serve 1,000 of these impressions. That being said, if 98%, so if 98 out of 100 people are seeing this ad all the way through your 15 or your 30-second, commercial that's running to them, it gives us a really good chance to make sure that ad has been seen and really internalized, which I think will lead to better engagement. Yeah. Typically, the creative that is served in this is 15 seconds or 30-second kind of video commercials. And like I said, the majority of the stuff that's playing on CTVs today is non-skippable. So um, you can kind of see down here these two little kind of charts kind of break down kind of the difference between like smart TVs, OTT devices, and gaming consoles, all of which can stream stuff. And then the different kind of providers that are out there that bring some of this content out there, whether it's like Fubo or Vudu or Tubi. These are some of the different providers out there that are serving CTV type of content. Growing platform. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. There's not a week that goes by that we're not getting some type of a report that shows more people cutting the cord, more people shifting over to digital. That being said, kind of like we talked about last week, this is about looking at your funnel overall. So sometimes if you have a high pricing on your CTV or you're investing a lot of your budget into CTV, might want to be a bit lighter on the broadcast side and potentially vice versa because they do cross over. That being said, they are different sets of eyeballs these days. There's a set of pure people who have never cut the cord and just consume on the broadcast side, and there's some people who've never had a cable subscription and are only dealing with the connected and the streaming space. So it's really good to have a kind of an interwoven strategy.
Um, Somebody has asked, do you know, based on your clients that you work with, what kind of KPIs they use to determine the impact of CTV ads? I know that it could vary from client to client.
It does. And this is where I think the digital space is starting to catch up a little bit on the attribution side. 4 or 5 years ago, we were just slapping hands saying, hey, 98% video completion rate. Good job. But like we just said, sometimes we want to know what that money is doing. So how do we break that down to an ROI discussion? So unless you have the right capabilities to maybe track back visitation after they've seen an ad, which we will talk a little bit more in our upcoming session. Q1 Media does have that capability. It's really, really difficult to get beyond a video completion rate. We do have capabilities that allow us to track back website visits as well as actual location visits. So they saw our ad on their TV and they either came back to our website, so we can break that down to a cost per website visit, or we can track them back to visitation at your casino, which then breaks down to a cost per visit type of metric, which we've been starting to weave into all of our travel and casino type of campaigns going forward.
So I
So it
think
does give
that's
us the ability to step outside of that a bit.
so I think that that kind of gives us some place to play around with. If we've got the ability to create some kind of attribution, or if our partner has that ability, we can use website visits. We could track people that come into our doors. It depends on how they set up the campaigns and the attribution, right?
I would say it really depends on the technological capabilities of the individual firm that you're working with. The pixels that we place to be able to track that back, we've really just kind of built that technology out, I'd say, in the last maybe 12 to 18 months. So some of it is even newer to us, but we did that in an effort to enhance these ROI type of discussions. I want to, even with a very upper funnel type of solution like this, I want to be able to show some type of ROI.
Mhm.
Okay. So good question. Switching over to digital audio, which is relatively similar to the streaming TV space, this is obviously just on the streaming audio side. You see a couple of different ways that we can place here, um, as well as just kind of understanding a bit more of like what audio is. We had talked a little bit 2 weeks ago about placing directly with, a publisher versus using more of a programmatic approach, which brings in exchanges and DSPs and millions upon billions of impressions out there. We can go directly to Spotify and we can place an ad directly with Spotify. That being said, they're not built out like a digital company traditionally is. They don't have all of the different third-party layers of targeting that they can add on there. So you're really targeting them more, by some of their interests and different things that Spotify can kind of pull out of their own platform. So maybe like genre, they listen to rap music or country music or different things like that. So while it's gets you on Spotify, it's a direct pipe that we have into them. Personally, I've always taken more of the programmatic audio approach. When I set up targeting and if I want to reach a casino intender or somebody who's visited a casino in the past, personally, I don't care if that ad is playing on Pandora, Slacker, iTunes, iHeart, any of them all combined, because I'm technically paying to get in front of that target, not necessarily each individual platform. So to me, an impression on Slacker is just as good as Pandora, is just as good as Spotify in terms of reaching the right target. And when you do it a bit more programmatically like this, you open up a lot more inventory and scale. Spotify might have this amount of scale for your area, whereas if you do it more programmatically, not only are you opening yourself up to a lot more players and a lot more inventory, but you're also opening up yourself to deeper targeting because you can traditionally, layer on a lot of those third-party demographic targets there. The metric benchmarks that we usually see and are shooting for in the audio space is a 90% audio completion rate. So once again, that means 90% of the time they're hearing your 30 or 15-second ad all the way through. Sometimes on some of the platforms, they will also let you run a 300 by 250 companion banner that pops up maybe, if they're streaming it like from their phone, that is a clickable ad. But once again, typically you're going to optimize this more towards an audio completion rate, just based on the fact that, driving clicks, you can drive clicks from this particular type of solution, but not all of the inventory is going to be clickable. So we do tend to focus more on that audio completion rate. Obviously, this lines up very closely with kind of the radio or terrestrial radio side of things. So once again, pretty similar concepts. We're reaching people kind of over the airwaves or through their headsets or devices, and they are hearing what our potential commercial is. I think the benefits over terrestrial radio is the ability to layer in, other demographic targets. So casino intent, third party casino intent, first party casino intent because they've visited other casinos in the past. The traditional radio stations aren't going to have those capabilities to do that. So they're probably going to be playing, or they're going to be recommending certain time slots to play your ad, based on when people who fit your demographic might be listening. We can make sure that the ads go exactly to the people that we're trying. Any questions on the audio side of things? Digital out of home. This is probably, I'd say, the latest and greatest in terms of what's scaling in the digital space. Obviously, this is going to line up pretty closely with what traditional billboards have been in the past. We've all been used to, driving up and down interstates and highways and roads and seeing those billboards out here. Now everybody is digitizing this. So, like I mentioned before, this could be everything from sometimes when you're pumping gas at the gas station, they've got those little boxes that'll play you an ad or two while you're pumping. This could be some of those kiosks in the mall that you walk by and they're showing different ads and things like this. So it's basically reaching people digitally on screens when they are outside of their home. I will say that this has been a lot more difficult to scale. This is probably similar to how CTV was 5 or 6 years ago when these impressions first started kind of coming out to the market. And there's a lot of different, since it is relatively newer, what we've seen for the most part is it's much higher kind of minimum type of spends thus far getting these type of platforms off the ground. So I can't say that we've utilized them a ton in the grand scheme of things. I did want to make us a bit more understanding of what is out there because you might have people coming to pitch you here and there on these types of things. Um, comes very, very closely in line, obviously, with the billboard side. And as you see, I think there's a pretty cool little, stat here that 62% of viewers engage in mobile device actions after seeing a street level ad. So that's a pretty strong figure in my mind, for what is still an awareness tactic. If you could tell me that of all my awareness tactics, that 60% of the people would come back and visit our site, that would be absolutely fantastic. So that is a pretty powerful stat. And it just kind of, to me, it speaks to the way that users or consumers like ourselves are digesting content these days. We're very used to seeing content pretty much everywhere. We're used to getting ads on our phones, on our TVs. We hear them, on digital audio, on the radio. Now we're used to seeing them not only on billboards, but on other electronic screens once we are outside of
I was I one of those articles that I read that came up, I think was saying that digital out of home has become really popular with smaller businesses. And I guess that goes to the pricing that we're seeing right now.
it very well could. I mean, it could also be, they might be placing within a neat, 2 to 3 mile radius of their location to try to drive when people are already out. If you think about it, yeah, you're outside of your home, so you're digesting and engaging with this
Mhm.
content while you're outside. Maybe it is super easy to stop in their location and do different things. So I can certainly see that being a little bit more of use for kind of maybe a small or medium sized business, that especially if somebody's trying to, drive consistent actions like that. Shifting over to display, I would say that display ads are probably the backbone of just about any campaign that I've built in all of my time working in digital media. It will be the most cost-effective CPM. There's lots of different types of targeting that you can place on there and layer on there, and it's going to be a relatively cost-effective way to reach millions of impressions from a CPM perspective, but also drive decent engagement and get clicks to your site. So if you are ever in a position where we got to get a lot of people to our site really quickly, display would be something that you want to weave in there. Lots of different ways to serve this. We typically like to serve it what we call cross device, which means it's going to hit desktop, which is laptops and actual desktop computers, as well as mobile web. So mobile web is when you're bringing up Google or searching for specific pages that you're typing into your web browser on your phone, like Safari or something like that. Those are ads that will just pop up on websites when you're searching on mobile web. That is different than the in-app experience, which leads more to the device ID side of things, which we'll also talk about here in a second. And then there's lots of different ways to serve display ads within all of the serving confines. You can serve just regular static ads. You can make them rich media. They can have movements. There's lots of different specs. You can move in animations, multiple screens that slide in and out. So you can get a little bit more creative with the ways that you kind of build your creative for that. And then what also kind of falls in when you're talking overall about display is native ads. Native ads are basically built, they're advertisements that are built into specific websites that are meant to look like content. So as you scroll down, maybe when your page loads, you're going to see an ad at the top, you're going to see an ad in the top hand right. As you start to scroll down and look at additional content on your website, you might have different boxes that pop up, and there might be 3 content boxes here, one, two, three. And on the next row, there might be a content box, an ad box that looks like a content box, and then another content box. That's what a native ad is. It's technically an advertisement that is meant to look more like native content on the site. For a while, especially a bunch of years ago, this was all the rage because a lot of people were starting to talk about ad blindness. You'd get to a page and all you see is all the ads. They were sticking out everywhere. That being said, I think we've worked through a lot of that. I mean, I think consumers are used to seeing ads literally everywhere they go right now. So this hasn't been as hot of a solution for us over the last few years. We've started to see the CTRs and the way that we measure this slip ever so slightly. I think just because
I was gonna ask.
consumers aren't caring anymore. They just don't care whether it's an ad or a piece of content. They're used to it all these days.
I was gonna ask if you've seen a difference in the click-through rates between the form of a banner ad and a native ad.
Incorrect. So we can see kind of the benchmarks down there below. Usually 0.08, and that's a 0.08 click-through rate, is kind of like the overall benchmark that all display tries to hit. Typically, we're used to seeing somewhere between 0.10 and 0.20. If you're much lower than that, you kind of got to worry, is our targeting set up right? Is our creative good? If you're much higher than that, there's also something that could be kind of sort of wrong just because it's outside of the normal benchmarks there. So native ads, I'd say a couple years ago, were kind of in the 0.2 to 0.3 range. And I've just seen them, at least on campaigns that I've run, slowly start to kind of slide back to the point where it's just as good as doing display to me.
Okay, so now you've given a bunch of casino marketers a data point. So now we have to ask about this. So I know I myself am guilty of it, that I will run a campaign and I'll start looking immediately. What's it performing like? What's it performing like? What's it performing like? So if you're saying that, between 0.1 and 0.2 is pretty good. So if I see something that's lower than that, then the concept is, well, then, is it the placement? Is it the creative? There's some questions that need to be asked. How soon or how long should we wait to see data come in and then ask the question? Like, I think it's not the first day, right?
Sure, it's
But
definitely
it
not. I
can't,
mean,
but it can't be a month later when we've spent all of our budget.
sure. Typically, I mean, so yeah, so first and foremost, it'll depend on the length of the campaign there. Um, you know, quick or short flight campaigns, yeah, you might have to address it relatively quickly if you see numbers that might be a little bit outside of the norm. Longer campaigns, usually I say in the first week, maybe 2 weeks of a slightly longer campaign, we're really just trying to make sure that ads are running and that they're pacing accordingly. Because it's really tough to make optimizations if you're not serving out your budget. So if you're not pacing to serve out your budget, it's tough to go in there and start to address optimizations on the CTR side. So assuming that you're pacing correctly after the first few weeks, that's typically when we start to say, okay, what does our CTR look like? If it's within the range, great. We're kind of where we expect to be. Let's maybe make a few optimizations here or there and let's move on. If it's well below the range, we need to make immediate optimizations. And optimizations in the digital space can be everything from blocking underperforming creative. You can do a creative analysis and see which ads are performing the best, shift more budget to those ads. You can go in and you can block certain sites that might not be, performing at all. Maybe people just aren't used to engaging and clicking on ads on that site, so you block that. You can also take a look at your bid structure. Are you bidding enough on the data to win the right impressions to get the right amount of clicks, to the table, so on and so forth. So these would all be things that you should be pressing your vendor on if you're seeing benchmarks that fall outside of what you'd want to see. And then one other kind of display tactic that I want to touch on, because it's a huge brand awareness play, is mobile interstitial. So this is a full page display ad that would take over an entire mobile device, whether that's a cell phone or a tablet. And it's obviously a massive branding piece. It's one of the biggest pieces of real estate that you can own, in the display world, because it takes over somebody's entire device. So I'll tell you that there's a blessing and a curse with that. I use it a lot just for massive brand awareness, because like I said, it's the only thing on that person's screen for that amount of time. But with that, there's usually a tiny little X in the top right hand. If you're trying to click that, you're probably going to get some false clicks from time to time. So I would certainly say, if you weave that into your campaign, take that with a grain of salt. It's a massive brand awareness play. You're going to see a ton of clicks coming from that line. It's also a full page display ad. So we put a much tighter, what we call frequency cap on there. You don't want to be blowing somebody's phone up with the same, entire phone ad all day long. So we'll usually only serve one ad per person or per device per day, to users like that. But like I said, it's a great piece of real estate. Just have to kind of know what comes with that territory. So usually something about a 0.75 CTR and above is what we're searching for there.
So I'm going to just clarify, because one of those benchmarks has a percent next to it and one of them doesn't.
Hmm.
So
Sorry. Yeah, they're both percent. They're both percent.
So we're looking at, for instance, for the display, 1 to 2 people of every 100 that are served that ad.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And then mobile interstitials might be closer to like 1. Yeah, that would actually click on it and obviously further engagement.
Okay.
So lots of times when you're talking about retargeting, where you place a pixel which says, hey, this person clicked through this page on our site, we want to send them more ads, that also usually falls in the display side of pre-roll video will roll much the same way that display does. We run that mostly cross-device, so it's laptop, desktop, and mobile web. This is completely different from the streaming environment, although it typically will use the same type of creative. You can run the same 15 and 30-second ad on CTV that you can for pre-roll. CTV is when they're sitting down driving the content themselves. Pre-roll is when they're searching around on the internet. They fit our targeting capabilities. We're going to serve them an ad free their content. So that's why it's called pre-roll. We're serving to them before they might click on an ad to engage with this content, and our ad's going to pop up and run for 15 to 30 seconds, depending on the creative that's sent. These environments are a bit more skippable, if you will. So typically the benchmarks that you're going to see for pre-roll is going to be closer to like 65 to 70% video completion rate compared to the 95% plus that we see for streaming. That being said, usually the CPM is going to be roughly a third or a fourth of the cost. So once again, sometimes you might have really, really good video content. Maybe your budget doesn't allow for you to spend a ton of it in CTV. Pre-roll would be a great secondary option because you're still going to get hopefully 7 out of 10 people to watch that content all the way through. You're going to be getting a lot more impressions for the budget allocation compared to a CTV line item. And as it says right here, obviously video is a great way for you to tell a story. When you are when you're serving a display ad, you got a box usually this size or this size to be able to try to get some story across to somebody and hope they want to engage with your content. Pre-roll gives you 15 or 30 seconds to be able to tell that story a little bit better. So once again, trying to weave this into different parts. This is another really good awareness play that you can weave into your campaign. And like I said, if budget is of concern, which for most of us it usually is, this could also be a very good kind of secondary fallback if your budget doesn't allow for CTV placements because they're too cost prohibitive. Okay. You
I don't
can.
know.
Oh,
I don't know if you're going to cover this, but somebody has asked what you think is the best medium for brand awareness and remarketing. So maybe that's two different categories, especially given that you're looking at, in some cases, one or two respondents, one or two out of every 100 impressions will get you that click-through rate, where obviously pre-roll is a little bit higher. But what would you recommend in terms of awareness, brand awareness and remarketing?
I think, absolute bang for my buck. To me, the best is going to be the connected television space because, like I said, I think that is delivering you the most engaged consumer because they're driving the content more times than not. They're sitting down in front of their TV while they're doing that. So I just think you've got a much stronger ability for that ad to be seen and also digested by that individual consumer. That being said, it is very cost prohibitive. So if you do need to say, well, look, I need to get a whole lot more impressions out there, I don't think display is a bad way to go either because you can reach a whole lot more people with millions more impressions and you can actually get people to your site. So I'd actually flip that question around a little bit and say, what would be the end goal for that line? If you're understanding that all we're trying to do is get somebody to understand our brand better, I'd probably say the CTV would be a great one. If you're saying, well, I got to also get people to my site, then I would probably go with, a more clickable type of solution there, or one that would obviously get people to the site. And these are the types of questions that I hope your vendors and the people that you're currently engaging with would be asking. These would be questions that I ask because, like I said, I've run enough awareness campaigns where at the end of the day, people are like, "Well, great, what did it do for me?" It's like, well, no, it was just awareness. We're just trying to make more people aware of your brand. It's like, well, no, but we needed to have X amount of conversions or X amount of this or that. So I like to get into these conversations a little bit more in depth and a little bit better detail, just to make sure that we're placing the right line items with what we want that particular KPI to be. From a remarketing perspective, I'd say 95% of the time that I've built in retargeting or remarketing lines, it's always display. These people have clicked to your site at least once. We can remarket to them with a lower CPM that's going to get millions more impressions out there just to people who've clicked to our site, and it's going to encourage them to continue to engage with us. I have seen pre-roll used before for kind of remarketing if you've got such strong video messages that you want to engage with people that way. But obviously, a remarketing line for pre-roll with a higher CPM won't stretch as far as one with display.
And I have to apologize. I misspoke when I said 1 to 2 people in every 100, and it's in 1,000 because it was 0.1 and 0.2%. So this is why the brand girl doesn't get the calculator.
And I just want to chime in real quick. And when we're talking about things like click-through rates and stuff like that, don't get fixated on one thing when it comes to digital. Don't get obsessed with like just the click-through rate, or because you're still delivering impressions. So just like television and radio and outdoor and print, people may not be clicking on the ads, but people are seeing the ads. So I just want to kind of say it's really important that we look at the click-through rates for the reasons that Drew has said and for the success of the campaign. But at the same time, you have to look at digital all encompassing as opposed to just focusing on just this little tiny number.
I think that's a fair point to bring up. And, it also kind of weaves into what, Julia was asking before in terms of like how quickly she would be addressing optimizations. That's the other thing is you can't really, or I would say it's not recommended to go in and tinker and make optimizations every day. you've got to make optimizations, and sometimes you got to give them 7 to 14 days to kind of play themselves out, see if they're actually working. Because if you go in and we're changing something up every day, we're never going to understand what's truly working there. So usually there's a set range of optimizations that you kind of go through based on if you're performing bad or you're not pacing. And most vendors will have that kind of set up appropriately, and as do we. But it is important to understand that sometimes when these optimizations are made, it will take a little bit of time to get them to play. Okay. Now, once we start to get into the mobile device ID space, we talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about the first party data that our company uses, that Q1 Media uses to build our own audiences. This is a really, really cool platform. I'll explain it ever so briefly. The easiest way to understand this is this basically has the ability to track our phones that we use every day based on the apps that we are using. So anytime you put a new app on your phone, it asks you if you want to share location services. If you say, yes, I agree to share my location services, you're actually opting in to not only sharing those location services, but understanding that you will be marketed on based or marketed to, or could be marketed to based on where you've been with your particular device. So we utilize this a ton in the travel tourism space because this is also the platform that we track back with location visits. Once we have a device that's been identified, we serve ads to it. We can track that back to your casino to say, hey, this device was served ads and then they visited. So now we start to talk about ROI opportunities and kind of, discussing a little bit in greater detail, how we can show actual foot traffic attribution.
So I'm going to jump in there because somebody had asked me and I answered it offline because they asked about tracking revenue. And my response was, if your media partner has the ability to track mobile device back into your property, you've got a part of the story, but ultimately the part that's missing is attaching that device to a player's account, which we don't
Sure.
have in our databases yet.
Yeah, and that's difficult because the other thing is when we're targeting this way, we don't know whose device belongs to who. All it looks like to us is device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is device 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so on and so forth. We don't line those up with really anything else. It's actually you can't really line those up on a one-to-one type of basis there. So this is a platform that we use very, very heavily. Adele can attest. It's been a part of all the campaigns that we've run with any of her clients because, like I said, you can track back that visitation. The other really neat thing with this is it gives us the ability to create super custom audience. So rather than use third-party data, which remember, third-party data is pieced together by cookies that basically say, oh, you went to a casino site last week. You must be a casino intender. You're planning a visit to a casino. Very well could be. We can use our data to draw what we call polygons, not really a geofence. A geofence is a dot on a map with a radius around it. We draw actual polygons, which can trace the borders of a building, a parking lot, a festival grounds, whatever it might be. And for our casino campaigns, what we've done is we've built a nationwide audience of casino goers. So if you've stepped into a casino at least 2 times in the last year, any casino around the United States, we'd consider you a casino goer. And then what we can do is we can serve the ads within a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour radius of your actual location to give you a more lower funnel type of target that we're serving to. So we're going to talk about this a lot more in the next session. This is what going to be the data is all about. How do you use data with all of these new skills that we've learned and all these new solutions? How do you marry the data in to make your campaigns really perform? But understand that's where this comes from. When I say that we can track back CTV visits and audio visits and just regular display visits, this also comes from that. There's a pixel that we can place along with our media. And so if we serve a CTV ad to somebody's set-top box, that pixel pairs with an IP address that then pairs with the mobile devices, and we track those mobile devices back to your casino. So this is the technology that gives us the ability to report on all of our foot traffic attribution.
So you bring up a really good point because I think it might have been the same person who asked about tracking revenue, subsequently asked about tracking room bookings, and we can track that based on click-through rate because if you've got the pixel on the site as well as the booking engine. So some casinos have a third-party booking engine. It's just their property management system. So it's not actually on their site. So if we can track it to tie that pixel to an event, like clicking through to book the room, then you can track some of that. So a lot of that, again, we can do the first part. Your media partner can give you that first part with the pixel and the tracking, but there's always a second part that we have to do on our end to make sure that they connect. But you can track room bookings.
We can place pixels on just about anything. Where we usually lose the ability to track like revenue and potential room bookings is if that goes to a third party site, and maybe that third party site that the casino is using doesn't want to place our pixel on that. So sometimes it just really comes down to that. But I mean, another great question and another really great kind of topic of conversation to really be pushing whoever you're using or your vendors on in terms of how far down that attribution funnel can we get. We do a lot of Google Analytics review as well, just to kind of make sure that the ads that we are sending out there are creating engagement other ways than just what we're doing. So that can also be a portion. More times than not, we want to be able to really give our clients as much information for them to take back to their GMs, property managers, whoever they report to show that the ad spends are actually doing what we intend. Next slide talks. Oops, maybe. Okay, next slide talks a little bit about the difference between like mobile device ID and geofencing. Really, the easiest thing I want you to understand about it is mobile device ID is extremely precise. When you draw that polygon, you're literally collecting devices that have just been within that polygon, not the street outside when people are passing by in their car, not the business across the street. It's literally just the borders of that building. So it's just a lot more precise in terms of what it's able to do. Geofencing is also a good tactic that can be utilized, but lots of times you're going to get some ad waste in that. If you're trying to, if you put a half a mile geofence around even like a stadium, you're going to be serving to that stadium, but you're also going to be serving to the businesses around, and that's going to bring in some ad waste versus if you're just serving to the stadium. So just a kind of a way to kind of break that down even further. Now we're going to start to talk about some of the more popular socials here. So you see Facebook and Instagram. I'd highly suggest that these are portions of your campaigns as well, just based on the fact that it's everywhere these days. Facebook and Instagram are two platforms that a lot of people these days have literally grown up on, and people are so used to engaging on it. So you typically get higher click-through rates. You typically get much stronger engagement on videos and different things like that. So you can see the difference in the benchmarks compared to regular display and regular pre-roll. And I mean, honestly, like I tell the story all the time, I'm a consumer too. And these are the platform, or Facebook mostly, is what I will click on ads on and buy stuff from all the time, because they do a really good job of serving me golf ads or other type of ads that are in line with what I want to engage with. So it's a really good platform to utilize. The targeting has gotten consistently better, where there are more genres that you can start to target. In fact, I was doing some research, and there actually is like casino interest and gaming interest that you can layer into your campaigns here. I will also put the caveat that we can also build that same custom audience of all the casino goers, and we can upload that into campaigns as well. So we're not targeting off of Facebook characteristics, we're targeting off of people who've actually been to casinos. So lots of times you can even layer in different types of targeting, to hit different parts of your funnel. You can use some of the more generic stuff in Facebook to hit more of the upper portion of it, see if we can expand your brand, to other people that maybe might not be as interested in casinos. But we can also layer in that low funnel audience that says, hey, this person's been to a casino a bunch of times in the last year. Let's serve ads to them because they live in a 2-hour radius of our property. So lots of different things that you can do there. You see some of the typical benchmarks. There's usually 0.15 to 0.35 on the display side of things. When you start to talk about the stories and the videos and the other reels that run, lots of times you're getting closer to 0.75, sometimes even 1% on the CTR and engagement side there. TikTok is another one that's probably a little bit newer in the grand scheme of things. TikTok also started to explode a lot when people were at home during the pandemic. It's kind of a different platform where the shorter the ads, sometimes the better. And they're meant to be a little bit goofy. It's meant to let people kind of aggregate their own content. So the video ads that we usually recommend that you run for TikTok are completely different than your CTV and pre-roll. These are meant to be kind of quirky, maybe even off the wall, engaging, and typically they're a little bit shorter in duration. For a while there, they were saying 6 to 12 seconds is the sweet spot for ad engagement on TikTok type of reels. Now, you can also see this marketing tip here that longer ones that run between 21 and 34 seconds also drive some pretty good engagement as well. But sometimes it's just kind of playing that game. TikTok is a platform that we actually are a beta tester on, which has been really neat because the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able to help them test into new concepts that then they roll out everywhere. So I guess the long story short with that, we've done a lot in the space. If you do think that you have pretty good video content, we can aggregate some of those, maybe cut and splice some of them into, some cool, quirky videos. This would be a really good place to run. The benchmarks are usually pretty good for that from the video space as well. And then the targeting continues to get better year after year after year after year. So this is another target where you can, use traditional geo-targeting to target by DMA, state, or province, but we can also upload our custom lists in there as well.
So, Doug had asked a while ago about whether we felt casinos needed to rethink the format of the messages they're sending out to players to better fit the mediums. And I think the answer is yes, because you have different audiences in each medium and they react differently.
Correct. And I think that this is a perfect example. I mean, you see one of the fourth points down there. This is primarily a Gen Z and millennial type of audience. I'd say when pandemic hit, it was this figure was even more staggering. It was probably 85% was mostly Gen Z and millennial that was, on TikTok at the time. It's definitely stretched out over the last few years. I think what you're starting to get, and probably will happen to me at some day, is you're starting to get kids that put on their account and then parents jump on to kind of, see what their kids are seeing as well. So the audience has definitely, skewed a little bit old, more tenured, if you will, the last couple of years. But Julia's point is perfect. This would be like I said, fun, quirky videos that might engage a little bit better with the more youthful side of the age range, whereas traditional pre-roll CTV might be on the more experienced side of the age range there as well. But it probably does make sense to align your content with who is going to be seeing the majority of those. Good point and good question.
Yeah, we had, I think way back in November, one of the properties had asked about whether TikTok was the right option, because I think a lot of properties are thinking through that, right?
Sure.
Politics aside, they're looking at it as a channel. Is it a channel for us? And I think that in November, when I looked up some data, it was about, of the US users, somewhere like 12 to 13%. So let's be generous and say 13% of the users were 50 and older. That was still a significant number of users because of the gigantic audience they have. So I think it represented something like 2 million people.
Sure. I mean, and yeah, TikTok has probably been the fastest growing of all the social platforms over the last couple of years. So, I think it is good to kind of break that down sometimes into metrics or the numbers like that we can kind of utilize. But yeah, I think whether or not we should put TikTok into our media plans really kind of depends on, I would probably use it if you do want to, try to engage more of the youthful side of things. Then, I mean, it probably is a pretty darn good platform to try to weave in there. So I think a lot of this starts to line up as well with like kind of what you just said, Julia, which platform should we be utilizing to drive engagement with which age ranges and core parts of our audience. Last solution we'll kind of chat on a little bit today is search engine marketing, which I think other people call it PPC or pay per click. As you see, Google continues to dominate the search engine use, 85% market share of desktop use, 95% of in the mobile space. And basically what we're doing is we are basically paying to serve ads to people who are searching for keywords that line up with our business. So casinos near me, casinos in Austin, Texas, casinos in Texas. These are the type, when somebody's typing that in, you obviously have an extremely engaged and a very actively seeking type of consumer. So we want to get our ads in front of them. And search engine marketing gives us a chance to pay for that. But we only pay for it if they actually click on it. So you can run forecasts as to what your cost per click would be and, try to figure out like what all the budgets are. I should say your vendor can help you all do that. And sometimes it's a very fine line. If you start all of a sudden investing in PPC, your competitors aren't just going to roll over. They're going to adjust their targeting as well, and they're going to try to buy more of that market share back. So sometimes it can be relatively tedious with the back and forth in terms of trying to buy, the right keywords that line up. There's also a lot of reporting out there that we utilize internally. We utilize a platform called SpyFu, which allows you to take a look at, what your ad spend looks like, but also the ad spend of your competitors. And so one of the things that it does is it lets you know what ads your competitors are bidding on very heavily, but it also lets you know, or excuse me, keywords. What keywords are they bidding on heavily? But it also lets you know underutilized keywords. So maybe there's other keywords that have, decent traction in the market that we can bid on that they might not, where we can grab eyeballs that they might not. So this has to be run by an expert. This should be run by definitely by a digital media company, just based on them having the expertise to do it. And all of this is measured on a CPC, which is a cost per click type of basis. So typically, like budgets are kind of planned out based on, hey, this is the budget, this is how many clicks that we can see to get. But like I said, this is really some of the lowest parts of that marketing funnel. People don't accidentally type in casino in my area into Google. So we really want to make sure that our ads are in front of those people, or at least trying to get in front of those people, because they're very low funnel type of intenders that we want to get engaging with our brand and work into our marketing funnel. Keep in mind, they click through to your site. Anything that's clicking through right now, if we've got a retargeting or a remarketing line, that pixel grabs them and we start remarketing them as well. So hopefully we're starting to see how we can use some of these upper funnel tactics, mid funnel tactics, and low funnel tactics to always be kind of reinforcing all of that marketing funnel that we're working. And that's for the most part it that with what I've got today. We've got about 5 minutes left. You'll notice we didn't really talk a lot about text messaging today. I think text messaging is really kind of newer in the space and it's tougher to buy that data. Q1 Media has not done a lot in that space as of yet. There are vendors out there that can handle it though, but that's probably one of the only real, I guess, solutions that from the paid side that we didn't touch on from a digital marketing perspective. So pretty good outline there. Once again, I'm kind of right up along my time. It's amazing to me like how much time can get snapped up when you're talking for 50 or 60 minutes, but certainly wanted to give us a chance or two to see if there's any other questions or any other thoughts that we have after going through this content today.
So I still have a question from somebody for you. But before we do that, since we are coming up in the hour, I wanted to do this little handy dandy Excel. And the person that will be getting, well, I guess the property will be Ronald Moore. So Ronald, I'm going to send you an email and put you in touch with Drew so that he can do your device research for you. But so the question we have is, and I'm going to read this to you because it's funny because when I saw the question, you were on one part and I think maybe some of it doesn't apply anymore, but he says, you've built a case. So it starts with the old adage that half of all the advertising spend is wasted, but you just don't know which half. And it appears that you've built a case for CTV as ads that are pretty much untraceable because it's more about watch time than it is a click through. And so it feels a little wasted then, right? It could be to some people. So this person wanted to know if you still think CTV is the best medium for ad spend. And I'm going to tell you that I answered him or her privately because I wanted to make sure they got the answer. And I said, you know, it really depends on your goal because I love TV for brand awareness, but I don't necessarily love it for something that needs to be actionable, right? So
sure. And I mean, to be fair, that was going to be my very first kind of like retort to that is, well, what are you doing with your TV spend? Like what type of metrics are we getting beyond, you know, what ratings and share rates and different things like that. So, you know, the way that I look at it is I don't think it's a wasted ad, but I do think it depends on how you've set that line up. If you've set that line up, you know, to just maybe target like age 18 plus within your market to see if you can spread some awareness. I mean, maybe you discuss that a little bit more. But if you've loaded in like a pre-custom audience, like if we're serving to somebody who stepped into a casino nationwide, but they live in a 2-hour radius of you, I'd argue that that ad is not wasted, regardless of whether they clicked on it or not, because you're serving to a lower funnel type of target. You're serving to somebody who we know is already in that space and they're already actively stepping into casinos. Now we're just trying to get them to come to ours. So I'd argue that, you know, maybe from both sides, but I can certainly see where it's coming from, you know, and I think as we've gotten some of these newer solutions like streaming CTV, like the streaming audio, that typically aren't lending itself to the same clickable type of things that we're used to for a dozen plus years with display and other type of solutions. I mean, these type of thoughts are very warranted and they're very understandable. I think you need to weave it in based on your budgets and what your budget can maintain. If you're if you're putting 25% of your budget to spend, to just serve a couple 100,000 impressions, that's probably not going to make a lot of sense. I'd rather serve 1 million plus impressions in display and just get a little bit more reach for that particular line of budget, depending on what it is. So I think it's a great question. To me, I think it really just looks at what type of targeting, which now kind of leads into what we'll talk about in 2 weeks, is now that we know what these solutions can do, how do we line up the right targeting to hit pure upper funnel awareness, but also make sure that we're we're putting our bang where we can, we're putting our dollars where we can get the most bang for our buck. And that's when you do layer on different demographic targets or first party data, which gets you a little bit lower, or it gets you eyeballs that are a little bit lower in that funnel. So then you're not playing with pure awareness. You're not just trying to create a new brand presence for somebody who's maybe never heard of you. You're trying to create a brand presence for somebody who you know is in casinos and lives within a drive radius of your particular area.
And I can
So-
also, whoever asked that question, if you want me to, I can give you a 3-question survey that you can benchmark your brand awareness and then do a pre and post campaign survey.
Sure. Yeah, lots of different ways to look at it. And
Yeah.
look, there's been plenty of campaigns. Like lots of times people want CTV, like, ooh, we need to run CTV, but here's a very modest budget to do it. I've advised against it many a times, just from the standpoint of, my job is to get you the most bang for your buck that you can get out of any budget that you might give us, big, small, or anything in between. And if there's a cost prohibitive solution that we want to work in there, sometimes that's just not going to fit and line up with the KPI. So I also think it lines up with your KPIs. If your budget is flexible enough and I guess, decent enough where you can work some CTV in, I think it's really good to test. And if you're working with a vendor like ourselves, where you can track back the location visits, that's when it does become a lot more actionable, because we can tell how many visits the display lines driving, CTV, audio, we can tell visits for all of those lines. So you can look at it, hey, I spent 20% of my budget on CTV, but we only got 5% of our visitors from that. Probably doesn't line up in the grand scheme of things, but you can then replan that for the next particular campaign. So you can use a lot of your results and your learnings from ongoing campaign to influence strategy going down the line. Adele and I have conversations like that all the time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I said a lot of it is communication. Drew and I sit down and talk about this stuff like endlessly. And really it's because we're both asking the questions. We're asking the questions to ourselves and each other and just having the conversations. And you need to have those conversations with your digital vendor. You have to have extensive conversations with them. So it's really important.
Well, thank you both. And thank you everyone for hanging out with us today. Ronald, I'm going to follow up with you, and everyone else, you'll get the recording so that you can share with your team. And I will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you much. Nice to chat again.